Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are in the audience, you just think you're sitting in a stage at Savoy Place. But at the same time tonight, we are broadcasting out to an audience of unknown and indeterminate size, the first of what hopefully will be a long series of shows, and tonight's is entitled, Is Greed Good? But before we start, understand that we're talking about tonight our social enterprises, and we're going to start with a message from our commercial sponsor.
The world is waking up to something new. Our international favourites bolt-on gives you the time you need to call the people who matter most. Get 3,000 minutes to 3 numbers for just £10 a month. Cut the cost of calling abroad from the UK from your mobile. That's good news. However you say it. Text WORLD to 61002.
So my name is Doug Richard. I run a social enterprise called School for Startups. School for Startups, it was a program that I started some 3 years ago with the very modest idea that I could help entrepreneurs, both aspiring and current entrepreneurs, start their businesses. I started with one class of 450 people in Newcastle. We are now 3 years later, and we've taught a little under 10,000 people. In the last 2 years, though, of those 3 years, we, of course, have been underpinned by the largest economic recession most of us have seen in our lives. And the type of people who have walked into our class has changed enormously. They've changed from people who merely aspired to start a business to people who wanted to start a social enterprise. People who wanted to start a business to people who had to start a business. People who had never intended to start a business who are now looking for a way to make a job for themselves when they had no choice because the job they had disappeared. But the most interesting thing to me has been the incredible surge of interest amongst what were entrepreneurs to become social entrepreneurs. And so the composition, the type of class we have run, has changed profoundly. It has changed from a group of people that ask very straightforward business questions to a group of people who frequently are on a mission. And that mission may or may not be self-sustaining. And the challenge I had in starting to teach people who are trying to run a double bottom line was that, in fact, it seemed to me quite arithmetic. If it's hard enough to start a business, it seems to me that a double bottom line is twice as hard. And thus what we come to is we come to tonight's subject, is greed good? Or if you prefer, how do we make greed good? Because it is the one thing I have learned in both starting a social enterprise and trying to teach other people how to start social enterprises is that it is challenge enough. And you have to be, if you'll excuse the terms I'm about to use, ruthless enough in running an enterprise. You have to be doubly focused to run a successful social enterprise. A successful social enterprise essentially says not only are we going to do well, and not only are we going to meet the obligations and expectations of the stakeholders of our business, which are our shareholders, our employees, and our customers, and frequently our communities as well, but we have also taken on the added burden, the added joy, if you like, of meeting the needs of someone else. And interestingly enough to me, social enterprises break down into various categories, and I know this is going to sound incredibly geeky, but essentially it's where are you interrupting your profit and loss statement? Are you interrupting the profit and loss statement somewhere in the middle? Are you artificially increasing your costs so that somebody can sell something to you at a price that they were unable to sell it to you before? Such things as fair trade fall into that category, right? We say, we are going to pay more, we intentionally choose to pay more. Somewhere between our top and bottom line, we divert what otherwise would have been a profitable activity, a profit that dropped to our bottom line, and we say, no, our social enterprise is about decreasing the ultimate net profit we make, the surplus we end up with, and we interrupt the path to our bottom line. It's a type of business model. There's another type of social enterprise I run across that says, we are going to run a venture that is a completely commercial activity. It is commercial from the top line to the bottom line. But when we get to the bottom line, we choose to take that surplus and we put it to work in some fashion that is not, in fact, a return on capital or a return to the shareholders in any way, shape, or form, but it's subrogated, it's changed. We divert that flow of money to some other good, some other purpose. And in fact, the most cunning of those, if you'll excuse the term, Julie, since I'm about to use your social enterprise as an example, the most cunning of them make a direct emotional and tangible relationship between the products and services that they sell and the social good that they intend to accomplish. Thus, it becomes part of the marketing discipline of the business to make sure that people know they are voting for the social good and increasing the profitability of that enterprise. And that's a different business model. But then I run into other social enterprises. These are very similar to the entrepreneurs I run into that I don't invest in. They're the ones that want to interrupt the P&L statement at every line. They're the ones who say to me, I must be a fair trade organization. At the same time, I must maximize net profit. At the same time, I have to help pygmies and dwarfs and albinos and one-legged women. You cannot, excuse every politically incorrect thing I just said. You cannot help the whole world simultaneously in pursuit. It's very embarrassing when your own phone rings in the middle of a live TV show. We're going to pretend that didn't happen, aren't we? And it's quite distracting, I might add. The social entrepreneur that walks in, it's going to be an evening. The social entrepreneur that walks in and pitches to me, and they do, I get pitches from social entrepreneurs, and the pitches they make say, not only are we doing this, but we're also hiring a group of people that need training, and therefore there's an added cost, but we're also going to be socially competent, we're also going to offer a cost advantage to the marketplace, and by the way, the surplus we make, which is a surplus they will never see, is going to then revert back to yet a third party. And this is the challenge that we face, and this is the interesting challenge, I think, that social entrepreneurs face. Because social entrepreneurs, I'm also finding, seem to come from two homes. They either come from starting point of being a business that seeks to be a business with an ethical quality about it, or they start as a charitable endeavor. They start with a social mission they intend to prosecute, and they decide that they are going to trade their way to a successful social mission. And depending upon where they start, they run into issues from either direction. Regardless of where they start, though, they seem to run into issues that are very serious issues, but to my mind are no different in large part than the obstacles that every other entrepreneur has faced since time immemorial. What I find particularly heartening at this point in time is the fact that we are actually at a very good moment for social enterprise. But even more interesting, we are on Monday of Global Entrepreneurship Week. Therefore, in some 90 nations simultaneously around the globe, as we speak tonight, there are people who are celebrating entrepreneurship. Not social entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship. And that is, in and of itself, by the way, a huge societal good. Entrepreneurs, those people who start businesses, whether they do so out of their own self-interest or do it for some other reason, are the economic engine of prosperity. It is not small businesses that create the wealth of all nations, it's young businesses. The National Bureau of Economic Research in the US just brought out a new piece of research that is going to have, all of us are going to have to deal with. It shows that businesses that are young, that have not been around for very long, that somehow managed to survive, because we all know the young businesses, volatility is a very polite way of saying most of them don't survive. The volatility of young businesses, if they survive at all, tend to contribute in two distinct ways to the wealth of everyone. One, they tend to create the sustainable jobs. And two, they tend to create the innovations that increase productivity, that lower the cost of life generally. And therefore, we have one source of people that are solving two problems. What's fascinating to me is that social enterprise adds a twist to it that offers the possibility of an amplification, an increase in the power of entrepreneurship to change the world. We have an opportunity to lead in how we do it, how much we accept it. We have an opportunity to set up our stand and challenge the government to make sure that it takes advantage of social entrepreneurs. We have a very, very large government. All Western nations do. And it's the responsibility of our government to spend its money wisely. it's facing some challenges in that regard right now. It appears not to have as much money to spend as it needs, or wants, or desires. I would assert that it is possibly the role of social entrepreneurs to perhaps help the government out of its current quagmire. So if anyone from the government happens to be sitting on the web right now and listening, since you're obviously not in the room, aha, that's my message to you. See, I get the podium. I get to say shit like this.